allows me to draw 2 new cards. Greed is good. I lost 1 card, but gained 2.
I play the magic card, Pot of Greed. It allows me to draw 2 cards from my deck.
Now I'll draw! The magic card, Pot of Greed! Thanks to this card, I can now draw 2 new cards from my deck, Kaiba.
Now let's see. I'll play this, my Pot of Greed. A magic card that allows me to draw 2 more cards from my deck. Now then, have you realized that this duel is far more than you can handle? Observe.
I play my Pot of Greed card. Huh, I bet you wish you'd drawn this card, don't you, Joseph? Now, I'm able to draw 2 new cards, which is something that you need to do quite desperately.
Well, looky here. I think my luck is beginning to change now.
All right!
Pot of Greed lets me draw 2 cards.
First, I'll activate my Pot of Greed card. This allows me to draw 2 more cards.
Now I play the magic card, Pot of Greed, allowing me to draw 2 more cards.
My move! Excellent. I play this, Pot of Greed. It allows me to draw 2 new cards to refresh my hand.
As if that'll save you.
I activate the magic card, Pot of Greed. It allows me to draw 2 more cards. Next, I'll...
Not quite, Kaiba! Observe my face-down card, Pot of Greed! Thanks to the effect of this magic card, I can now draw 2 more cards from my deck. And you know what that means.
This could be exactly what I needed. Now I activate Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 cards. I just hope these 2 cards can help me out.
I'll play a magic card. My Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 cards.
Pot of Greed lets me draw 2 cards from my deck. This duel's not over yet, Raphael.
We have a card in our deck that can help us turn things around. But we need to draw it right now.
Next, I activate the magic card, Pot of Greed. Now I can draw 2 more cards. You're going down.
Now, I activate my Pot of Greed magic card, so I can draw 2 cards.
Then I'll activate my Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 cards.
First, I'll play my Pot of Greed magic card, letting me draw twice. And
So, I'll begin by activating my Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 more cards.
First, I'll play a magic card known as Pot of Greed. So I draw 2 cards.
Perhaps this will cool you off. I play Pot of Greed. You know what that means, don't you? I can draw 2 additional cards from my deck.
I activate my Pot of Greed magic card. Now I can draw 2 more cards from my deck.
Second, I activate Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 more cards from my deck.
well, the party's over. First, I activate my Pot of Greed magic card. That lets me draw 2 more cards.
Yeah, I activate the magic card, Pot of Greed. That lets me draw 2 cards from my deck.
I'll start with this. The magic card, Pot of Greed. This allows me to draw 2 more cards from my deck.
And thanks to Pot of Greed, I can draw 2 cards.
I'll begin my turn by activating the magic card, Pot of Greed. That allows me to draw 2 more cards from my deck. Now, I'll start by activating the magic card, Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 more cards from my deck.
But I'm not done yet. Next, I play Pot of Greed. This allows me to take 2 cards from my deck and add them to my hand.
Sounds good to me. I'll start by activating Pot of Greed. And you know what that means. I get to draw 2 new cards.
I activate Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 cards.
Here goes, buddy. For my move, I play the spell card, Pot of Greed. I'm
then throwing down the spell card, Pot of Greed! And now I'll use its magical charm, and then draw 2 additional cards from my deck.
And I activate the spell card, Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 cards. I don't think so. I'm playing the magic of Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 more cards. Want an example? Here. This should do nicely. I play the spell Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 more cards. I play Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 cards. Perhaps this will convince you then. I activate the spell card Pot of Greed from my hand. Due to its effect, I draw 2 cards.
Watch. I'm gonna use my Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 more cards.
Ha! And I activate the spell card, Pot of Greed. Now I'm allowed to draw 2 additional cards from my deck to my hand. Here's 1, and now, here's number 2.
I activate Pot of Greed. Now I can draw 2 cards from my deck.
That's it! My draw! First, I'm activating Pot of Greed. And with this spell, I can draw 2 more cards. I play the spell card Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 cards.
It's my turn. And I play Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 cards from my deck.
Should prove that. There. I play the spell Pot of Greed. Now I may draw 2 more cards.
All right, it's down to this. So here goes something. Sweet, I'm starting with my Pot of Greed.
No, I'll take this. The spell card, Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 cards from my deck.
I now activate Pot of Greed. That gives me 2 more cards. First, I play Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 more cards from my deck. My turn. Go, Pot of Greed.
Next I'll play my Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 more cards from my deck.
And I activate Pot of Greed. So now, I get to draw 2 new cards.
So here goes something. I play my spell card, Pot of Greed. Oh, Pot of Greed. Looks like I get 2 more. One of my faves, Pot of Greed. That's 2 cards for me and a whole lot of pain for you.
And now, I'll use my Pot of Greed.
Okay, Chumley. I activate my Pot of Greed, which, of course, allows me to draw 2 more cards.
Here goes. I play Pot of Greed, which means I get to draw 2 more cards.
It's done. I activate a personal favorite of mine called Pot of Greed. Sorry, now I pick up 2 more cards. So I play this. Anything look familiar? I have a Pot of Greed also, and it lets me draw 2 cards.
Ready? I play Pot of Greed, so I can draw 2 cards. Now, getting back to the whole
Get this!
I play Pot of Greed, which I'm sure you know lets me add a couple more cards to my hand.
All right, kid. Settle down. Well, what do you know, Aster? Pot of Greed.
Bad, but get this! I activate Pot of Greed, so now I can draw 2 cards.
Huh. Don't mind if I do. I play Pot of Greed. This spell card allows me to draw 2 new cards from my deck.
My turn. First, I activate Pot of Greed, so I'll be drawing 2 more cards.
In my turn, senor. Mark my words. Now I activate my Pot of Greed, so I'll be drawing 2 more cards.
I play Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 cards.
Awesome! I just drew Pot of Greed, so I pick up 2 more cards. Watch the pro. Pot of Greed. I pick up 2 cards.
Fine. I activate my Pot of Greed, so I'll draw 2 cards. Then,
I activate the spell card, Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 cards.
Watch this. My favorite. It's my Pot of Greed. 2 more for me.
All right. I play Pot of Greed. So I'll draw 2 cards and some...
I'm in command. So, I activate Pot of Greed. This lets me draw twice. Alright, Holmes, let's do this. I'll be playing Pot of Greed. Check it out. I get 2 cards.
What? It's payback time. I'll start by playing Pot of Greed. So now I get to draw 2 more cards.
I think I'll be taking 2 more cards, courtesy of my Pot of Greed spell.
Next I play Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 more cards.
I play my Pot of Greed. And with 2 more cards to choose from.
As well you should. I draw. Then I play Pot of Greed, so I can draw twice more.
About time. I play...
Hang on a sec. Esper's special ability activates. Now I have the privilege of looking at every card you draw.
I activate Pot of Greed, so I can draw 2 cards.
Exactly. I play the spell Pot of Greed. Give me something.
By activating this, my Pot of Greed spell card. So 2 more cards for me.
Nicely done.
Then I activate Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 cards from my deck. And
I activate Pot of Greed, so I draw 2 cards.
all right, Chaz, my move. I play Pot of Greed, so I draw 2 cards.
That's not all you lose. Because I play Pot of Greed, so I get 2 more cards. And what do you know, it's my Pot of Greed spell card.
I activate Pot of Greed. It looks like it's 2 cards for me.
You just watch. My move. I play Pot of Greed, so I draw 2 cards.
Watch what you wish for. I activate Pot of Greed, so I pick up 2 more cards.
And with Pot of Greed, I pick up 2 more cards. I know what you're thinking.
I play Pot of Greed.
Pot of Greed. And you know what that means. I get 2 more cards.
And I'll start with Pot of Greed, so I draw 2 cards.